most important aspect of the practice of meditation is consistency. The most important aspect of the practice of meditation is consistency, and the reason that that's the case is because when you're not practicing meditation, you're practicing ignorance. The reason that that's the case is because when you're not practicing meditation, you're practicing ignorance. Meaning that you're practicing thinking that what you think is true. That's ignorant. Ignorance is practicing thinking what you think is true. And because that's the currency for humanity, because that's the currency for human beings, there's ignorance about ignorance, right? Because that's the currency for human beings. Almost nobody thinks what they think is ignorance. Just to, I wanna try and be as focused as possible in terms of what this is all about. And sometimes when you get into these teachings and you get into these terminologies and definitions that come from another time and another place, it can be confusing. It can mystify everything. It can make things seem to be a way that they're actually not. And so you could say that everything that has been said about this is making things seem a way that they're not. You could say that everything that's said about the truth is making things seem a way that they're not. Why? Because all we have to work with as far as the truth is concerned is language, and language is not the truth. Language is symbolizing, taking specific aspects of the truth, symbolizing it into language, and then talking about it conceptually. And since the truth is non-conceptual, maybe the most important thing you can learn about the truth is that it's non-conceptual, so that you understand that when we talk about Zen, or we talk about Buddhism, or we talk about mystical Christianity, or Sufism, or any of these, Advaita Vedanta, non-duality, when we talk about any of these things, we're not talking about the truth. Because we can't talk about the truth. So what we're left with is we can talk about concepts, and the concepts we talk about are referring to the truth, but the truth can never be spoken of because it's non-conceptual. And ultimately, this truth that can never be spoken of is the reality that you are. So I want to focus as much as possible on the bare bones of this, so that you don't get caught up in becoming a Zen practitioner, or you don't get caught up in becoming a Buddhist, or you don't get caught up in becoming a Sufi or a Christian or a non-dual practitioner. Because all of those things are, if they're taken to be reality, if they're taken to be the truth, all of those things are mistakes. All of those things are not true. All those things are, if you take those things to be the truth, if you take any belief system to be the truth, no matter how magical it may appear, no matter how enlightening it may appear, lost is lost, right? No matter what form it's in, lost is lost. So, in terms of trying to point as clearly as possible to what this is all about, every once in a while I come across these things that I think might be helpful. This is a brief statement written, I believe it was written by Roger Ebert's wife, Roger Ebert, the film critic, right? He died of cancer, cancer of the bone, cancer of the jaw. And she wrote, that week before Roger passed away, I would see him and he would talk about having visited this other place. I thought he was hallucinating. I thought they were giving him too much medication. But the day before he passed away, he wrote me a note. This is all an elaborate hoax. I asked him, what's a hoax? And he was talking about this world, this place. He said it was all an illusion. I thought he was just confused, but he was not confused. He wasn't visiting heaven, nor the way we think of heaven. He described it as a vastness that you can't even imagine. It was a place where the past, present, and future were happening all at once. Ebert was politically progressive and helpful to many up-and-coming filmmakers, and he loved movies with a great passion. He said that they generate empathy and help us to identify with and understand others. He even talked at times about his life as a movie. It's interesting, isn't it, right? Because these teachings that I speak of here, I have said the exact same things, have I not? That time doesn't exist, that reality is a movie, your life is a movie. And so here's a guy, you know, who is on his deathbed, and he's having these periods where he's actually seeing reality. And when he reports it to people who don't see that reality, right? It's confusing to them. What are you talking about? What do you mean a hoax, right? But what if it is the case that what he reported was what it's like to be awake, what it's like to see things as they are, and what he means by the term hoax, right, or illusion? What he means by the term hoax is that you've been taken. What's a hoax? You've been taken, right? You've been taken. So if you grow up in this world as it exists, and you're conditioned by society, you've been taken. You've been taken by the hoax. You've been taken by the illusion. You've been taken by the idea that what you think is true is true. That's what I said earlier is called ignorance. What you think is true. If you think what you think is true, that's ignorance. Why? Well, to answer that in the most simple way, I go back to what I said earlier, because what is true can't be thought, right? What is true cannot be thought. It's non-conceptual. So no matter what you think is true, that's ignorant. Then there was this other thing that I came across, which I think is interesting, because there's this guy that sends me stuff. There's a whole nother world, as you have been, who've been involved with this, have come to see. There's a whole nother world here when you start to get into it, right? Perfect Brilliant Stillness by David Karse. David Karse was not a spiritual teacher. Yet while trekking through the jungles of Ecuador, as he was staring from a thatched longhouse into the rainforest, David experienced an intense and graphic fear that culminated in a resignation toward the certainty of death. I think this is a very important thing, because this keeps showing up for people who have these sudden realizations. Ramana Maharshi was the same thing. When people have this certainty of death, right, this experience of graphic fear that culminated in a resignation toward the certainty of death. In other words, the resignation toward the certainty of death means that I resign, I give up. I no longer have any hope about that I'm not going to die. That's a resignation toward the certainty of death. The ensuing state of surrender and acceptance, which, as David describes, landed in my lap without any accomplishment on my part, resulted in the following total understanding. This guy was not a spiritual seeker at all. But after having this, he's lying there in this hut in Ecuador, staring out of the hut, and it suddenly occurs to him that his death is real and he will die. And he experienced the terror of that, and then after the terror, he has this other experience, which is called total understanding. Still later that night in the jungle, toward the morning, lying there in presence, there was a point when all the experiencing stopped. The thinking and the feeling and the processing that had been happening all completely ceased. I was not aware of it at the time because there was no thought and no awareness of time or indeed of anything. Only in hindsight is there a looking back and realizing that there was a period of time, out of time, when there was no thought, no experience, no thing, nothing. It may have been hours, it may have been an instant. It was not of time. Only in retrospect can it be called a place or a time of stillness or emptiness, because when it was occurring, there was no time, there was no place, there was no sense, no awareness of anything happening. I was not asleep. It was a condition of complete stillness and completely alert awareness. But there was nothing there to be aware of, no sense even of self to be self-aware. It could be called a completely empty stillness and awareness. I have no idea how long this lasted. Eventually, at some point, in this place of no time, no thought, no place, no self, there gradually began to creep in an awareness that there was a simple watching of something. As this awareness distilled out of the emptiness, attention focused, and the realization was that what was being watched, what there was awareness of, was a guy lying in the bamboo hut in the jungle. This continued to focus until there was an awareness, a kind of recognition of what had always been thought of myself, David, lying there on a mat in the middle of the rainforest. And there was an abrupt realization, my God, there's nobody home. This was the moment at which nothing happened. This is very important. This is the moment at which nothing happened. Like a pop of a bubble bursting, a shift in understanding, I am not David. There has never been a David. The idea of David is a part of a thought, something like a dream that doesn't matter. The individual self, the one I thought resided in that body, looking through those eyes, the one I thought a few hours ago had woken up enough to perceive presence, is not there, does not exist, never was. There is nobody home. This was not an out-of-the-body experience. I have had these in which myself, experienced being out of this body rather than inside it. An experience looking at the body from outside instead of looking out through the body's eyes. This was not like that at all. What was being watched here was not only the body, but the whole David apparatus, body, mind, self, soul, personality. What is watching is all that is. The watching, what I came to know as witnessing, is neither other than the body or mind or the whole David thing, nor not other. It does not originate from here, from the body mind, but Also, it does not stand apart from it. Beside it, it is inclusive of it, because it is inclusive of it. The witnessing is clearly not being done by me, even a disembodied me. This witnessing is not being done by anyone, any entity. That's the point. There are no entities. There is nobody home. There is only the witnessing. Abruptly, instantly, effortlessly, out of stillness, a moment, an instant of radical, severe disorientation, discontinuity, then a stepping through into perfect clarity, not at all unlike the experience of waking up. A dream seemingly real, lasting all one's apparent life. A stirring, and the sleep dropping effortlessly away, a moment of disorientation as the dream is recognized as dream, and there is waking to the real. Immediately the dream falls away, and it is known that the dream was never real, that one never was what one had been dreaming. There is no before and after, no moment when I was no longer David. This is the gateless gate, only the seeing that David never was. As near as can be said, the perception now is that there is no me, no David, and I is that which has never not been all that is. Always, everywhere, perfect, brilliant stillness, and nothing which has no name continually outpouring, seen now always not as from this mind-body thing. So, what's he describing? You know? What he was describing here was very consistent. It's interesting that his name was David, because what he was describing here was very consistent with the experience that I had, that I wrote about in my book. You know, this experience of there being no one home. There is nothing here. And he talks about it in this passage by describing it as there being a witness. There's something, there is a witness. There is an awareness that's aware of everything. There is an awareness that is aware of everything. And the thing about his description of it that I think is very useful is that he's saying this awareness was an awareness of the idea of me. So in other words, you could be aware of your personality as this psychological reality that's operating in the world. The awareness, the witness can be a witness of the psychological personality that's operating in the world, as well as a witness to this body that the person identifies with, as well as the story of that person's life, the whole 9 yards. And yet at the same time, this awareness is no longer misidentifying itself as only those things. It's now seeing all of that from a place beyond that. And both of these stories, the one with Roger Ebert and this other story, they're both describing the exact same thing. They're both describing the exact same thing. And the reality of it is, regardless of how you come across this, whether it's through Zen, meditation, through, it doesn't matter how you come across it, the reality of it is that it is possible for you to discover what these people speak of. It's possible for you to notice that there is an awareness that has always been here, and that for the most part, like most of humanity, you have misunderstood yourself to be something in that awareness. And for the most part, just like most of humanity, you have misunderstood yourself to be something in that awareness rather than that awareness. The big hurdle for this, for people, is that they understand. This is important for you to take note of. In this process of discovery, in this process of learning about these things, you come to an understanding about these things. You come to this understanding about what you are. I understand what you're saying. Understand when you say that I'm not my physical body. That makes sense. If I really examine it closely, if I really inquire into it and look closely, I can see that can't be true, that I'm my body. I can see my body. I can't be what I can see. So I have that understanding. I understand that. I understand that I am not a psychological construct. I understand that I am not a personality. I understand that those things aren't actually real. And here's the pitfall that most people fall into. I understand those concepts, right? I understand those concepts, right? And then you think because you understand those concepts that you are experiencing the truth. But the reality of it is, if you understood those concepts, if you really understood those concepts, if you understand that the earth isn't flat, right, then you relate to it differently, don't you? Yeah. If you understand that you're not your body, if you understand that you're not the personality that you thought you were, wouldn't you relate to it differently? If you understood it, right? And the pitfall is the person that you consider yourself to be holds these teachings as concepts in your mind. The person that you consider yourself to be holds these concepts in your mind and will have you participate in this process of trying to be what you understand you are. The person that you consider yourself to be will hold these concepts in your mind and have you try and become what these concepts say you are. Therefore, you don't really understand. Right? Because if you really understood, given what we're talking about here, given what these people were talking about here, if you really understood, you couldn't tolerate continuing to be who you thought you were. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you really understood what's happening, you couldn't tolerate continuing to be who you thought you were. Why? Because that's the source of your suffering. So if you really understood the truth, you couldn't continue to tolerate being who you thought you were.
That's why we all suffer.
Exactly.
Trying to tolerate it.
So then what do you do, right? What you do is you understand that you don't understand. You understand that you don't really get it. You get the concepts about it, but you don't really get it, because if you really got it, right, then you would know, right, that I am not willing to continue to be something I'm not. If you really got it, you would not be willing to continue to be something that you're not. Well, so then the question becomes, well, how do you do that, right? Isn't that your question? How do I do that, right? And that's where it gets really interesting, because the answer to that question is, how you do that is you do nothing. Why? Because the truth is already the truth. You already are who you are. And all you have to do is understand that who you think you are and who you're behaving as isn't real. It won't change. But the way you relate to it can be completely different. The way you relate to it can be that you don't take yourself seriously. You don't think you're really your body. You don't think you're really your personality. They're still there, but they don't have the effect that they did in the past, because now you see them for what they are. You see that they're simply part of this relative world that we live in, and you will continue to have to act as if you are a person and are a body as long as you're in this world, right? But it's a hell of a difference when you know that that's not all there is, when you know that's not the reality of it. Especially when you're in a situation like what's his name? Ebert was. Roger Ebert was. And you will be. And you will be. So you can just keep playing the game of holding it as a concept and practicing and trying, to make it, and trying to make what's already true happen. You can continue to do that, right? Or you can begin to allow yourself to recognize that you don't have to do anything. What I'm referring to here is already the case. And what I'm saying is, yeah, it is the case that the spontaneous awakening is very rare, right? But I'm also saying that as far as I can tell, and this is based on my own experience, right? But I'm also saying, as far as I can tell, this can happen at any time. It doesn't require it being rare. It can happen at any time. How can it happen at any time? Well, the reason it can happen at any time is because it's already happened. How could it not happen at any time? It is happening now. You are now what you really are. You are now what you really are. And that's why I said what I said about don't hold it as a concept that you understand and think because you understand the concept that that's going to get you anything. No, you have to live it. The only way to be who you are, the only way to know who you are is to be who you are. Right? The only way to know who you are is to be who you are. If you start being consistent with the understanding of the truth, if you start being who you're being, how you're acting is consistent with the understanding of the truth, then you'll get the fruit. Doesn't that make sense? Yeah.
It seems to me that people with severe dementia are closer to reality than we are because they don't have an illusion that they're controlling things.
Well, but see, the thing about that you have to be careful about is that my dog's closer to reality than we are too, right? Because my dog doesn't have any misunderstandings about who he is, right? It's never occurred to him that he's even a dog, right? Right? But he doesn't get to enjoy the experience of being a dog either. So somebody with dementia, yeah, it's true that their experience of reality is purer than ours, but they don't get to enjoy it. All they get to do is be the awareness that is there then without an understanding about they're a person, but not really, you know what I mean? The possibility that's there to enjoy is when you know who you are and you're still being a person. Then you can enjoy being a person because you realize, as Roger Ebert said, it's just a movie. So we don't know. I can't speak for my dog. He seems to be fine. He doesn't seem to be having any problems. You know what I mean? He doesn't seem to need therapy. Right? And probably people who have dementia are the same way. Right? But we look at them and we evaluate them relative to our awareness, to our reality, which is you can't evaluate. That's like evaluating my dog and comparing him to my reality and say, oh no, he's a dog. I have no idea what's going on there. I can only look at what seems to be the case, and he seems to be fine. In fact, sir, when you see things as they are, one of the things that's outstanding about it is that everything is fine. There's no problem. It takes a human being to create a problem, right? We think about things. I was listening to a teacher talk about this the other day. From a human perspective, right, and from a time perspective, we think that things should last, don't we? From a human perspective and from a time perspective, we think that things should last. That's why we want to save the planet. It should last, right? That's why we want to live longer. We should last longer, right? But that's only from a human perspective and a time perspective. The reality of it, there's nothing wrong with the fact that nothing lasts. That's the truth. Everything is going to go. The planet is going to come to an end. So what's this stuff about saving it, right? The sun will burn out. Everything is going to come to an end. But it's the human being who has this idea, well, we should try and save it. Let's control it. Let's control what's going on. As if we ever had any control of what's going on. That's so ridiculous, right? And that's one of the things that you get to experience by waking up and seeing things as they are. You no longer are burdened with the idea that you should control anything. You're no longer burdened with the idea that you should control anything. You allow everything to happen the way it's happening. Why? Because who the hell are you? You allow everything to happen the way it's happening because who the hell are you? Stop playing God. And if you see things this way, and if you allow yourself to wake up and be what you really are, you can start having some fun because there's nothing to control. There's nothing wrong here. Now, you know, your mind is not going to accept that at all. I understand. Nonetheless, it's true. Nonetheless, it's true. It's up to you. You know, you can either stay in the horror show, you know, or realize that this is just a movie and just get some more popcorn. It's up to you. All right. Have a good day.